The G7 and NATO summits were obviously dominated by the ongoing war in Ukraine, the highest inflation rates in decades, and a rapidly worsening global food crisis. Western countries can do nothing much to stop Putin's war in Ukraine without getting directly involved, except, of course, continue to impose those sanctions on Russia. However, the negative effects of these non-military tools will only increase over time, particularly as winter comes. People, of course, need oil to heat their homes. Lots of it coming from Russia. So what on earth is going on with how the UK is engaging with these issues? Let's speak now to Bob Seeley, the Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight, former sergeant in the British Army, and a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Thanks for joining me, Bob. Firstly, it was a very significant NATO summit last week, probably the most significant NATO summit that we've seen in a decade or more. Was it a success?
I think broadly it was a success in the sense that there was a reasonably large amount of unity, although one should not judge the success of Western policy making by the fact that people are united, because actually you have to be united in order to act. So it's great that they're united. It is reasonably good that they are acting, but they have to continue to act on scale in the medium and the long term, and those are bigger issues.
It's interesting looking at how the UK domestically has responded to these issues. Of course, the Prime Minister making the announcement that defence spending will rise to 2.5% of GDP by the end of the decade. Is this about...
I mean, just on that, Tom, just on that point, I mean, that's basically a non-promise, and one shouldn't be too congratulatory about that. Effectively, if you're saying we have a fantastic, well, we have a profound defence emergency at the moment, so we're going to increase spending, but you're not going to notice it for 8 years, you're effectively kicking spending, that increased spending, into the long grass, or frankly into the medium term, almost long term by Western democratic standards. So actually it's not much of a promise, and I think it's frankly pretty disappointing.
Is it disappointing that the United Kingdom, by some measures, is the third largest spender on defence in the world, the third or fourth largest spender in the world, with the largest spender in Europe? Why then is our army so comparatively small? Are we just spending the money in the wrong places? Or it does seem extraordinary that we do spend so much money on this issue.
I think you're looking at issues within defence, and there are defence experts much more capable of talking about this than me, but you're dealing with pensions, pension rights, you're dealing with procurement, you're looking at a ministry that delivers very few major procurement projects on time and on budget. So you are looking at a whole host of issues when it comes to the efficiency of spending in the defence field. And the fact is that it costs, a fifth or a tenth to employ a Russian conscript than it would be to employ a much better trained British soldier. You're also looking at T-72s, which are much cheaper than a lot of the kit that we produce, and therefore you get economies of scale. So if you look at relative spending, we don't do so well. You're looking at an absolute spending and overall figure, which is very large, Tom. How effective we are at that expenditure is a different matter. So more people will get more bang for their buck, because in many other countries, soldiers and Air Force men and sailors cost less, but also because the kit is built not quite to Western spec, because you're going to lose a lot more of it in a war. Now that's a matter for debate, but the Russians have been losing a great deal of kit in this war. That's certainly true.
Yes, and I suppose they've been looking after their kit in a not particularly good way over the last few years, and it's been breaking down all over the place. I suppose that does put some backing towards the British way of doing things. But let's look at NATO as a whole now, because of course it's getting 2 new members after Turkish opposition seemingly melted away. We don't have any details, public details that is, of whatever deal may have been done between Turkey and Finland and Sweden. What do we expect has gone on behind the scenes here?
I suspect some kind of reassurance has been given by the Swedes and the Finns over what the Turks consider to be extremist Kurdish groups that operate in some European countries like Sweden and like Finland. And clearly the Turks wanted to highlight the issues that they have, highlight the fact that they don't think that many of the political arms of these Kurdish groups that operate in Turkey are justifiable. They are more likely to want to see them as terrorist groups because they are related to paramilitary groups within Turkey. And there was, for example, in the Syrian war and the war against ISIS, a great deal of friction between the UK, the US, France, and Turkey over how they viewed the Syrians the Kurds in northern Syria, who provided a great deal of the foot soldiers that the West used to defeat ISIS, and who we supported with intelligence, with air power, with special force support, etc. So there were frictions, and I think what the Turks perhaps very understandably want is an understanding of the importance of Turkish internal and external security to the NATO alliance. And because of Turkey's role, actually I have some sympathy with the Turks here and what they're trying to do. And I think it's good that that their opposition they've given up on their opposition. So clearly they have made the point they wanted to make, and NATO has listened. So that was a good outcome.
And clearly some greater unity there. I'm afraid we've only got 30 seconds left in this conversation. But just lastly, there are 4 countries that are in the European Union that are not in NATO. They include Ireland and Austria and Malta and Cyprus. What's the chance, in your view, of these countries joining NATO too?
You have to ask them specifically. I'm not sure. I think everyone should pay for their own security. So if you look at a country like Ireland, Ireland is effectively entirely dependent on its security from the UK, whilst at the same time being very often politically critical of the UK. I think that's an uncomfortable relationship, and either the Irish should take into account that we effectively provide their last line of defence, or pay for it themselves. Start choice.
It's a strong point there. Bob Seeley, thank you so much for joining me this morning on The Briefing. Really appreciate your time.